I chose the harpsichord and clavichord due to the fact that I hadn't really heard about those instruments until recently. They seem a bit lost in time, as if they've fallen out of relevancy, and I wanted to look further into that. In this podcast, I will be going over how and why the harpsichord and clavichord lost their popularity due to other instruments such as the piano. Chronologically, the clavichord was first. The clavichord was a small box keyboard instrument speculated to have been created in the 14th century that was primarily used for aid in composition. Its smaller size rendered it impractical for concert use and was mainly a tool for practice for most musicians rather than a performative instrument to use in front of a live audience. Later on, in the 16th century, the harpsichord was created, being a much larger and louder keyboard instrument that was used in many concert and performative scenarios. It was created similarly to a clavichord in which the strings would be plucked at the press of a key. It was presumed to have its beginnings in Italy, with the earliest reference being in Padua, 1397. The harpsichord may have started in Italy, but widely and very quickly became popular throughout Europe, with many means of production happening in both Italy, France, Germany, England, and others. The harpsichord was used both in a soloistic role and support role. The plucking of the strings made a bright sound, although with little to no variation in volume. The sound is not as popular as many other instruments today, but during its time it was a favorite for many. Composers such as Bach and Scarlatti were creating pieces involving the instrument. Around 1700, the pianoforte was invented, a keyboard instrument similar to the harpsichord, with the difference of the strings being struck rather than plucked, allowing for much easier variation in volume. Due to the harpsichord's lack of expression compared to the dynamics of the pianoforte, it began to lose its traction in the 18th century in favor of the piano. Eventually, the pianoforte became the staple for what the harpsichord had previously been, and composers such as Bach and Mozart started composing for the piano due to the increased dynamic range. Still no crescendos. Attempts had been made at making a harpsichord and piano hybrid to give the harpsichord the same amount of expression that a piano had, although in the end the piano did come out on top, being the most popular to this day. As well as this, the clavichord also began to lose popularity soon after. However, there is a recent reincarnation of the instrument that functions the same as the clavichord. The function and/or role of the clavichord is currently being filled by the MIDI keyboard, a small electronic keyboard device in which composers use for aid in composition or practice. Like the clavichord, the MIDI keyboard isn't very practical for a performance setting, as its sole purpose is for composition and studio session. Not quite a revival of the clavichord as much as it is a replacement, similar to the harpsichord and piano situation. As of today, the sound of the clavichord and harpsichord are rarely used in modern music, and when heard are mainly associated with the time in which they thrive, which would be the 16th to 18th century. There are instances of more recent artists using the harpsichord in each way due to its unique sound, such as the Jackson 5 and Jimi Hendrix, however it is occasional. Many tribute performers play the harpsichord solo to this day, playing music from the period in which he was born, such as Bach, Mozart, and Haydn. Both harpsichord and clavichord had unique and beautiful sound, but have become outdated and surpassed in terms of function and expressionism. Just as a last-minute input on my part, I would like to say that I do love the sound of the harpsichord, although I understand why people favor the piano over it. The harpsichord is very limited in terms of dynamic range, and if there's anything I want to summarize about this lightning talk before I get it over with, is that music will never be constant. There are always things that can change, always things that can fall out of relevancy. Nothing will ever be able to definitively stand the test of time. Some instruments may make it pretty long, but we don't know. We don't know. There will always be new innovations to come, but there will always be instruments to look back on and appreciate for what they were during their time.